So I want to keep going what I talked about from that last video. How can we hate someone when we don't know them? Or how can you hate me when you don't know me? You think to realize that we hate someone or we hate a critic because there's certain points where we've seen just enough data that gets us to conclusions. We jump to conclusions to basically disagree, dislike. And we think to know that when as many facts and details that we found about this person. And I'm not necessarily talking about political figures today like Trump, Joe Biden, and any most world figures that are hated, right? They obviously realize that they have the toughest jobs in the world. We obviously have to come to realization that, yes, they have the most toughest jobs in the world as a result of it. Another good reason why they make themselves targeted, but of course, they made the decisions, right? Every decision comes with a price. In terms of why you make the decision to hate on someone when you don't know them. You obviously want to know and just understand it, right? From the deep side of it. Now, if you think to find out any reasonable factors of how to get out of it, if you're looking for any simple suggestions to help spill you on how to get out of the obnoxious or oblivious differences. We're driven by difference. We're driven so much by opinion. We've probably studied into so many successful figures about how to get out of difference, how to get out of your own bitterness. We've probably just as well read about good books and self-developed common number of books that you've heard about, like authors of John Maxwell, Tony Evans, Neil, the book of The Power of the Positive Thinking by Neil, it'll come back, the last name will come back to me, and Norman Vincent Peale. You know, one of the good books we read about on being able to grow as people. The topic of the question that why I wanted to dive more deep into is really, it's just about also essentially how to dive back into your own rabbit hole. The one thing that you can regrow from yourself by not hating on someone is, well, dive back into your own rabbit hole. One of the things that we struggle to dive back into the rabbit hole is because we've become so enamored with the distractions that we have come across and some things that we've seen. We don't mean to get distracted because we have to. We do it just to stay involved and stay engaged. We're human beings. We scattered about so many areas and places in the world. We've wanted to explore the ideas. And you can just as well learn how much of principles that we've learned biblically in our own spiritual concepts and understandings we've grown from. And because we know that we're human beings, we're looking for the most simplest answers that solve our problems in every aspect of organizations. Whether you think that the statuses of statistics drive your everyday decision, look no further. That shouldn't be the case. What it really should boil down to is coming down to the critical matter of your own legitimate decisions. Yes, it's really important to gain the data. Yes, it's important to just as well read about the news, do your own homework, to gather details. Then, at the end of the day, it's important to make that decision. Because 70% of our decisions are actually motivated by our credible sources that we look into. Google, Facebook, Apple, Bing, Microsoft applications that we use every day, right? And the computer and internet technological devices that we use. Whether we choose to find out what we want to grow from. We obviously want to grow from our hate. We want to grow from our bitterness because every day we are, yes, the answer to your question is, are we bitter? Are we enamored with distractions that make us bitter? As a result to why we are so victimed to jump to conclusions. I give you from my perspective because from my own backstory, and why I wanted to give it to you from my backstory is because growing in America was an awesome adventure. I have to say my story just as well would compared to your kind of story, where for some of you foreign people, people from Iran, Spain, Holland, all over the world, you get my drift. You could just as well step into my shoes, more as well as I'd be happy to step into your shoes about getting to know your story. The international immigrant population is what also helped really provoke the melting pot of America, the America of the melting pot that today we live through. And because it's easy to get enamored with opinions and the bitterness of ourselves. We're more curious, yes, at the same time. One of the lessons I learned about in one of the most critical stories of successful people that I've talked about is staying curious. Stay curious, but also be aware. One of the critical things that even in today's successful figures would talk about is to get uncomfortable. One of the things that why we're such explorers, we're people of explorers and gatherers. In the historical times of the hunters and gatherers, we explore a lot so we can get to know more about ourselves. And yes, and the other part of it is when we want to grow content and comfortable in our own surroundings. That's okay in itself, but don't always assume that you have to rest on your laurels. In other words, you don't have to think that you have to look at the ceiling every night after you've come home from a long workday. There's just as well as more productive things that you can think of doing to be more active, proactive rather than reactive. Proactive rather than reactive. We're just as even more victim to be reactive because we don't mean to. And then essentially that's why we are distracted and get more oblivious to the distractions of today's internet gossips that we hear about. One of the critical lessons I've learned, and I come across this very intentively, is basically staying productive when in times of desperation. One of the things that why we get desperate and at the same time creative is so that way we avoid any issues of getting into having severe anxiety. A typical person would want to get out of their anxiety. They want to get more active about how to confront really their own mental or physical issues. That's why one of the reasons we talk to therapists today, so who can get us back on our feet, or successful doctors who can diagnose us in that we are able to conduct ourselves every day with the healthy bodies that we are given, right? With the blessings. At the same time, we want to be able to be successful. We always look for success. And typically, the only way that you're also able to gain your own success is by not hating on others. You can just as well try to emulate them. Try to be more complimenting. Like, for example, hey, I like the way you've achieved those achievements. You made the goal successful. Great job. Great job on getting the promotion. I hope the best for you. I wish you all the best. And then we can continue with the communication while you work up the ladder. Or you congratulate your own coworker. Hey, great job on that project management and how you manage the project. I'd love to one day get together with you and get your any ideas on how I can improve on any future projects for the company and the management team. This is a similar topic of empowering things, empowerment of ability. One of the things that you actually want to have is an empowered ability to be active. Take an empowered ability to stay constructive. It doesn't mean that you have to go outside and yes, to be able to stay physically fit. It also means what can you do with your own inventory? The inventories of your own home, the inventories of your own office, for example, right? You don't want to be able to obviously rest on your laurels, right? And you want to be able to critique it. At the same time, you want to also be open for criticism. One of the things that, of course, we know for sure that we've been criticized so many times. And why, at times, why we've been criticized is because what also leads to the hate towards another. our own boss, for example, our own managers, lead supervisors. We get criticized because, well, at the end of that project or at the end of that session, did you do your job? Did you carry the responsibilities that your supervisor asked you to do? It's a simple answer of yes or no question whether you did it or not. And that's why we get criticized. Not just because of bad performance, but because you didn't follow through what was being asked. Simple things that can just as well help swallow the pride and the bitterness for most of us. We think too much of being bitter, chasing after the one simple thing, the dollar, the money. We're always curious about anything, not just because about money, not just because how we grow professionally or as an individual. We're more curious and just as well understanding. We can grow more into being curious and understanding of everybody if we dismiss the hate, if we practice the normal morals of good ethics. We can just as well be more active in the confines of your own home, in the confines of the office you work at. We're more, yes, involved. Not just because we can just as well easily be entangled by the distractions. It's easy to spread hate from that fashion. By being enamored with distractions, we're more victim to spread hate. Because at the same time, we don't mean to, and it's not our fault that we have to. We just get victimed into it. One of the principal factors is the method to avoid from being victimized, but get more active about how to be more proactive. And you can get rid of being victimed or being suffered into something that might have victimed you. Particularly, we can all be witnesses of being victimed and being taken advantage of. And that's why probably one of the reasons why the hate spreads, because we might have been victimed to something that we didn't like about from the beginning. And you can just as well stop that from happening by retracing from the beginning and just going forward to what happened and be able to decipher the details you came across before. And in turn, in your future, you'd realize that you learn from the mistakes that you made and carry on to what you can do better next time. And have a mentor. One of the things that we are struggling today is mentorship. We struggle to have mentorship because of our hate. If you can get rid of the hate in someone, you can just as well have a mentor or be mentored by that hater who you hated particularly, and you could just as well establish friendship or a mutual trust in that matter. One of the critical lessons that today's successful business people, the entrepreneurs who get into philanthropy, my understanding of why we get into philanthropy, or my understanding, or most people's understanding who have known the knowledge of business and philanthropy, is because mentorship is another factor. And also in the careership field of engineers, chemists, laboratory mechanics, biopharmaceutical manufacturers, the organizations of health and immunology, the oncology community wants to be able to provide better health. Obviously, the one critical thing, and this is, and again, in summarizing the hate factor of how we can get more positive impact from the haters, obviously, but also provoke for the good result. One of the things that, again, what's even understood, and actually it's been shared a lot in the medical community, is because of the good shared of data that has solved the hated ideologies in the Western medicine, but also provoked to provide efficient health care. Because at the same time, we care about our health. Today we care so much about our health because that's what drives us to be more productive people in the society. We want to be able to retain our healthy bodies. We want to be able to help ourselves produce more economically, but not get taken advantage of. In the aspects of how can you hate someone, or how can you hate me if you don't know me? You can look back at your own previous data of experience, your own exposures to why you think that you got victimized to hate critical figures. We hate the most critical figures because we don't mean to hate them. We just because as a result we're victimized to jump to conclusions. And instead we can take the time to dive in to the rabbit holes for ourselves, but also even the hated critics. We can find time to go back, going through the rabbit holes of Donald Trump, going through the rabbit holes of Joe Biden, going through the rabbit holes of any political figures today that run the world, to make sure that we as people want to be able to be more proactive rather than reactive, right? You can get more proactive than reactive. So I'll touch up again on this next upcoming topic. I'll talk about how to be confident, and also more confident. I say this confident as many times because confidence is one of the most important things that we have to retain as a person. You could just as well learn it from a self-developed book to tell you about how to be confident, but it's just as well as more on how to practice what you read from or what you preach from. Practicing what you preach. You can get rid of hate by practicing what you preach for good data of information you can get out of. Rather than validating excessively the one person that thinks that he said this information wrong, you can just as well politely and respectfully disagree it. And then validate their good data and their misdeeds and disagreements as well. And follow through with basically a concluding conversation to still hold the mutual agreement. I'll touch up again more on that later, and we'll elaborate with more awesome topics. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.